What is up, fellow moviegoers, and welcome back to another edition of the ONETA Movie Show, brought to you by PTE Creative. As always, I am your host, Evan Davies, along with our co-host today, our favorite internet bald man in a spiffy shirt, Dylan Davies. Now, Dylan, do you want to tell the audience what we're doing today? How did I make you suffer on this one?
So I guess the best way to describe it would be a rewrite, sort of Batman v Superman.
Yeah, so we are currently going to be just having a conversation. We have no notes prior. This is just two people talking over coffee, essentially, of how do we fix this godforsaken film that was supposed to be the start, the big start, if you will, of the DC cinematic universe. And woof.
Yeah, I took a lot of notes about the movie itself, like things that just don't make sense because there's a lot of it.
Yep.
And I'm sure because you watched the Ultimate Edition and I watched the theatrical, I bet yours has a little more sense to it.
A lot more sense to it.
But also, do you need an extra 30 minutes added to this movie to do that?
No, this movie should be a tight.
130,
That's
130 minutes.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say like an hour 30. That's brutal. Yeah, 130, 135. I think would be a reasonable cut of this film. Um,
Yeah.
I did not take any notes on necessarily what's going on with the film, but I documented every single scene. so I
Okay.
could so I could literally so I could be like, "Oh, why was this there? Why was that there?" And you're correct. In the Ultimate Edition, it is far more coherent and it's a far better film. It's still not tremendous because it still has the same problems that were in the theatrical in terms of the over the top sizzle over steak approach that Zack Snyder always has, which is why I will never understand why DC thought Zack Snyder was the guy to not only start their universe but kind of run their universe, so to speak. I'll never
Yeah.
understand that. But the Ultimate Edition does a way better job of coherently pitting Batman versus Superman as to why they need to fight. But at the same time, has the exact same problems of we want Wonder Woman. Well, how do we get Wonder Woman? We kind of just make Wonder Woman. How do we get the rest of the Justice League in? Oh, let's just shoehorn them in. How do we get uh, how do we get the two to fight? Well, let's make Lex Luthor the ultimate villain. Okay, but what do we do with him? Well, let's make him the Riddler. like
Yeah.
it's,
I have a
it's
lot of thoughts about Lex Luthor in this.
so so. Let's do a quick summation of what you are thinking there are problems, and we're probably going to agree on all of them. So,
Well, no, I mean I have 4 pages of it,
holy
so
shit.
we'll we'll have to go little by little.
Okay,
But to begin with, before I even started the movie, what I did was, what changes would I make if I were the producer of these movies?
sure.
So if I was like the Kevin Feige of DC, what would I do?
Yeah,
So do you have anything like that you would change?
that I would immediately
I have a
change
couple.
if I were Kevin Feige of DC. If I were at the
Yeah,
time Jeff Johns and Walter Hamada, I think. Um, First and foremost, I would have never made Man of Steel with Zack Snyder. But
well,
we have to pretend that we were in that spot already. Number one, I would never
yeah.
I would have gone with a new director for Batman versus Superman. Um,
Okay, I wrote that down as well.
I have basically three questions that are going to guide me through this exercise. I think are going to guide us both. What are our goals? Where are we going? And what characters are we focusing on? That's the only three things you really need to think about. Zack Snyder does not do a good job of following a goal to where you want to go. He does not have a long-term vision of what's going to be best for everybody. He has a long-term vision of what's best for Zack Snyder's version of stuff. If you want better ideas of that, go watch his interview with Joe Rogan. Because it's one of the most infuriating things as a fan to look at. And then what characters are we focusing on? You can't introduce in a highly stylized movie in which we need to spend 20 to 30 minutes of the film. If you were, I mean, that might be an overstatement, but cumulatively, to look at this movie and to see the long shots of the cannon shells coming out of the mortars falling to the ground, or the big deep cutaway shots on things that don't matter. There's a lot of time wasted in this film because it's Zack Snyder's style and sensibility. And
Yeah.
so he doesn't have a good vision of what your goals are, where are we going, and what characters are we focusing on. We're, especially in the Ultimate Cut, you are supposed to be caring about. There are ultimately, at the end of the day, two characters you're supposed to care about in this movie. That's it. But we're supposed to care about Lois and Superman and Ma Kent and Batman and Wonder Woman and Alfred, and we have to be intrigued by Lex Luthor. Plus, we have all of the little minions going through. Then there's Doomsday at the end of this thing. It's a chaotic mess of what characters are you truly focusing on? What's the point of why we're doing this? You know, how do we further our goals all the time? So if I were the supposed Kevin Feige executive, I would have found another director right off the bat and just said, hey, that was a really fun. I think Man of Steel is a good movie. It's superfluous in a lot of ways, but I think it's a good movie. But it's very superfluous. I think it sets up God Superman lording over people pretty decently well. I don't think that's inherently a bad theme if you want Batman to be adversarial to him. But then, when you're supposed to see broken down Batman getting pissed at a god, and then all of a sudden you're supposed to just be like, no, Superman's all about hope. Meanwhile, he's crushed entire cities in fights. Like, how is he supposed to be the white light to Batman's, dark shadows? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So immediately I went with the directorial team and a creative team that understood what the mission really was.
Yeah, the pre-production changes I wrote down are change the director, and the two I have down are Matthew Vaughn and Denis Villeneuve, because at this point Matthew Vaughn has already done X-Men First Class, Kingsman, and Kick-Ass, and then Denis Villeneuve has done Prisoners, which is already a WB movie, so he already has worked with Warner Brothers.
Okay.
He's done Enemy, and he's done Sicario. So I mean, he's done enough quality things where you can already tell, like, yeah, he's a good director.
I'll go with Matthew Vaughn in that instance if we're gonna pick between the two. But that's just
I guess it depends on what tone you want overall, because Matthew Vaughn and Denis Villeneuve are definitely different tones.
Very, very different.
And then I would recast Lois Lane 100%.
Okay.
Because there's already precedent for this. What's her name? Rachel was recast from Batman Begins to The Dark Knight.
Yeah.
So
I mean, granted, that was because Katie Holmes was pregnant, but yes.
Yeah, but they still recast her. It doesn't matter what the reason is.
Yes.
Like it's a successful recast. And then I would recast Lex Luthor, completely change the character. And I couldn't really think of like a good actor I would put in the place. I put Corey Stoll, but I'm not 100% happy with that. He's at least more intimidating than Jesse Eisenberg.
Well, so let's go on those two recast ideas. Why do you want to recast Lois Lane?
Because Henry Cavill and Amy Adams have like negative chemistry. Like they have absolutely no chemistry at all.
I don't think there's no chemistry there. We're not talking Hayden Christensen, Natalie Portman bad. Um, it's not the best.
Sure,
It's not the best, but I wouldn't say it's the worst either. My issue with Lois Lane is Amy Adams is a phenomenal actress.
of course, yeah,
you can't
she's great.
deny that. The issue I necessarily have with Amy Adams being in that role is you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. If you use Lois a lot in this film, which Amy Adams would dictate, you do. You play to your strengths. It's no different when they did the first Batman movie. Joker was in it for a certain amount of time in the script. They cast Jack Nicholson. Guess what? They had a lot more Joker in that movie because they had Jack Nicholson. Because he's the strength
Yeah.
of the film. You need to play to Lois a lot then. More than you probably would if you just had a good actress with not as much of a name, with not as much of a. I mean, Amy Adams is now going into Oscar territory during this time. Like, that's where she is.
Oh, she's been in that since 2008.
Right. So you're dealing with heavy hitting actress right there. Does that inherently serve you to play to her more? Or on the flip side, do you get a great actress like an Amy Adams to play a pivotal character in one of your main character's lives, but then not use her at all, or use her very little?
Well,
Does that make
the
sense?
person I wrote, yeah, the person I wrote down is Margot Robbie, which obviously changes the future of the
Yeah,
DC universe because she's going to be Harley Quinn then. But at this point, she's done Wolf of Wall Street, About Time, and Focus with Will Smith.
that's about it. Yeah, that's
So like
true.
she's been in stuff that is like widely known, but she's not like a huge star yet.
Yeah,
And
she's not
also,
the world star at that point.
yeah, and also if you can't get chemistry with Margot Robbie, then you're not going to get chemistry with anyone.
That is
Like,
true. She just has a beaming energy with everyone she's around in every picture.
yeah, she makes everyone around her better. So, like, if you're the whole thing is you're supposed to care about Lois and Clark together, but I don't give a fuck about them when it's Amy Adams and Henry Cavill.
I would say I do, but I don't. I'm not entirely sure because of the quality of the film. Right? Is
Yeah,
do I like when I look at individual? The thing is, this is I think Batman versus Superman is a really good example of the modern highlight film. Studios now, especially through those mid 2000s or mid teen movies, really started going the way of the highlight movie, where they just went, well, if we give them enough really cool shit, it won't matter. And Batman versus Superman, and that's all Zack Snyder's career, because you get
that's a
something
very
like,
cynical way of that's a very cynical way of making a movie, though.
oh, I know it is, it's brutal, but that feels like what we're getting a lot of the time. Is we're getting these big highlights of whoa. Like for instance, I loved going back and watching this movie when I only watch Batman. Because the still images of Batman, the brooding, like Ben Affleck is a phenomenal Batman. I don't give a shit what anybody says. That's a genius casting. Especially an
Yeah,
older, grizzled Batman.
yeah, I like most of the cast. It's just Lex Luthor and Lois Lane that I really have a problem with.
Right. And so I love going back and watching those scenes of Batman, and then you throw a little bit of Wonder Woman in there for fun. But I shouldn't want to do
Oh,
that.
and maybe I would recast Wonder Woman as well.
I wouldn't do that. I think it's better that way. I'm not saying
But
Gal
okay,
Gadot is the best, but
you have hindsight now. You think she's the best choice for Wonder Woman?
I think I don't have a better option. I really don't. Because here's
I'd rather just take a risk and recast. Like she's good in the first Wonder Woman. She's not good in the second. She's not good in this.
she's not bad in this, but she's very limited in this. Like they don't do anything with her in
Well,
this movie.
it's kind of the whole thing is like she's not great as an actress. Just unfortunately, that's just kind of the truth. She's never going to be like a great actress or anything.
Yeah,
And then you get Zack Snyder, whose weak point is he doesn't get great performances out of anyone really.
no.
It's all visual. It's not, and the director's main job is to get good performances out of actors.
It's like we talked about on
The
our ET
work.
episode. That's the whole point: is getting a performance out of people.
Yes, yeah, and that's what differentiates great directors from mediocre directors. Because Zack Snyder definitely has a style. He has great visuals, but in service of what?
Right. I would table that one for now, only because of this. I am of the opinion I have no issue if you have. I think Ben Affleck is phenomenal casting for Batman. Henry Cavill, although he was known, he wasn't known at this point.
Yeah.
Superman was his coming out party where people started to talk about him in bigger projects and bigger things, right? So,
Oh, also Matthew Vaughn had Henry Cavill in Stardust as well.
so that makes they have a working relationship already, and to my knowledge, there's no problems with it. So that's good.
Yeah.
But so we go with the Matthew Vaughn. We have our heavy hitters in Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck. I agree, I can see your point on Lois Lane. We could recast to somebody else. I would table Wonder Woman because I think it's not necessarily like a ringing endorsement for Gal Gadot or Gal Gadot, however we say her name, because I've now heard it's supposed to be Gadot, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's what I've heard as well.
I'm just trying to be respectful. But I love the fact that I love the original Superman model where you get stars around somebody, but you cast your big roles with relatively unknown actors that you're seeing are on the rise and that are good because then they embody the part and people only see them as that part. And Gal
Mm-hmm.
at that time is just Wonder Woman. Like she's only ever going to be known as Wonder Woman unless something crazy happens in this world. She is Wonder Woman, and I like that approach.
Yeah.
And I agree with that casting decision in terms of going with a
You
relatively
could,
unknown.
yeah, you could cast a complete unknown and get away with it if they're good.
Right. And so we could rethink of a recast of Wonder Woman. We'll think on that one.
Yeah, let me. I'll start pulling up some lists.
think on that one. And then Lex Luthor is a. I'm not gonna lie. I'd go. I could go with a Mark Strong for Lex Luthor. I know it's easy because he's bald and most of the stuff, but he
But he
has
he's also worked with Matthew Vaughn, so
right
that works.
another act. I'm just trying to think of other actors that I think could play that role
You could do
successfully.
like if you want like a darker one, you could go Bryan Cranston.
Right. The worst part is you immediately think bald because it's Lex Luthor, and it's not inherently the point.
Yeah.
The point is not inherently get a
Well,
bald man. The point is
the the thing I wrote down is I'd want him to be more like sleazy politician almost, rather than businessman.
well the issue I think let's go through here. What is our greatest issue with Lex Luthor in this film? Beyond obvious that it's not Lex Luthor.
Well, I mean, well, yeah, the whole character is like literally awful.
It's I actually thought the approach of the idea of young tech mogul such as a Mark Zuckerberg or an Elon Musk at the time was a really
Yeah,
inspired idea. I liked that. Because it also really would speak well to the beginning of the times that we're starting to release this movie in, where we're starting to see the the choosing of sides politically in the world. I think that works really well for a Lex Luthor type. I just don't understand why you have multiple characters in the DC universe that fit better to that character in terms of the character that they wrote, but they went with Lex Luthor. That doesn't make sense to me. Lex Luthor is powerful, intelligent, intimidating in what he wants to do, and he's constantly riding the line. And part of his thing is, I'm for humanity, but humanity sometimes won't fight for itself, so I'm going to fight for humanity the way I see fit. It's not about I'm, laughing villain conniving my way through, you know, Riddler-esque
Yeah.
blackmail and shit. Like, that's not the point. This was a decent rendition of what the Riddler could be in a modern context.
Sure. I mean, yeah, the thing I wrote down is if I don't respect you as a character, I'm not going to respect you as a villain.
Right.
And um, like, yeah, like any great villain is one that you kind of secretly respect.
Yes.
Like even though Thanos is his like overall goal is like kind of insane. Well, it is insane.
He has a point.
There's a level of rationale to it that is understandable. Or like the Joker, you see like okay, he just wants to create anarchy because he thinks that actually will benefit um, society in some way. And then I'm trying to think of like other villains, like Hannibal Lecter. You respect him. You can tell he's a genius on some level.
Yeah.
Like you don't respect a villain that you can't even respect as a person.
Right. So the thing is this is no villain sees themselves as the villain outside of maybe the Joker. And
Yeah, that's true.
and so they are always, especially when you bring up the idea of like Thanos. Thanos truly believes he is doing what is best for everybody. He's just like, I'm
Yeah,
seeing like worlds are dying, things are going to shit because we don't have enough because we can't control ourselves. But if we got rid of half of everything, we wouldn't have this problem. And so he does that. Um, but the it's the logic there that's okay. But it's sound reasoning, and he believes he's doing the right thing. He does. He makes sacrifices for himself to further his goals. What is Lex doing here to do that? And that's where, if when we're thinking of where this character's gonna go, what are our goals? Like, what are the characters that we're trying to focus on? We obviously need to worry about two characters: Batman, Superman. Where else do we want to focus on? I'm almost to the opinion I have two of minds. I have an idea for no Wonder Woman at all, or I have the idea of Wonder Woman being the balance to the two of them coming together.
I I was taking the big overall goals of the movie as kind of like you have to keep them. So like if I had to keep Wonder Woman in it,
Sure.
I would. But if I had the chance to do everything over again, I would say leave her out. She's not needed. You could hint at possible like future ones like the Flash and all that. You can hint at that. That's fine. But in terms of this story, it's not necessary at all.
So here's where I would say this. I think let's take the challenge to keep Wonder Woman in this movie. We'll have a lower.
Okay.
We'll have a new Lois Lane. I think Margot Robbie would be a good
What
choice.
about who's that girl in Kingsman? Um, shit. She was also in the Mummy. Remember that? The Tom Cruise Mummy.
Oh yeah, yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Sophia something. So, I can look it up too.
Kingsman.
Sophia Boutella. That's it.
And what role are we having Sophia Boutella in?
Wonder Woman. I think she's a better actress than Gal Gadot. She has physicality in the Kingsman movie. Like she's a capable stunt person.
Interesting.
I'm just thinking because you kind of have to keep her as like at least some kind of ethnicity because she's supposed to be Amazonian technically. Because I don't want to whitewash it or anything.
No, 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 no. Well, also, like, the rendition of the Amazons, you could have done anybody and it would be fine. The rendition of the Amazons that you see in what, like, we watched Wonder Woman right after. I watched Batman versus
Yeah.
Superman, and Ab's like, okay. And then because of the Wonder Woman scenes at the end, she's like, let's watch Wonder Woman. I was like, okay. So I went and recorded a show, and then we watched Wonder Woman. And the rendition that they do with the Amazons and Wonder Woman is great. So that's a good goal of where are we trying to go. Sophia Patella is not a bad decision. Um, I just always see her in a villain role because she just seemingly always wants a villain role. And
Yeah.
to me, she doesn't exude Wonder Woman. That's another thing that I think Gal does well is because she's not great. There's almost like an earnestness to her where you kind of like buy that she's the cheesy, hopeful Wonder Woman.
But
So
that
like,
works. That works when she's playing a fish out of water in Wonder Woman. It doesn't work when you're trying to make her an overall part of the world.
yeah.
You're
So
building.
so I would say this: we can think about recasting Wonder Woman. That's fine. Let's worry more about these characters. How are we going to get them from place to place? What are we going to do?
Oh, just before we move on, there was one more thing I had down in pre-production, which is I would change the writers, and I would give it to I don't know if you know him, Michael Arndt. Know him?
Maybe.
He, he won an Oscar for Little Miss Sunshine, which was best original screenplay.
Okay.
So he already has proven he can create original things. And then after that, he has Toy Story 3, which proves like he can adapt from previous installments, you know.
Sure.
And then he's also a co-writer on Force Awakens, so he shows he can also handle giant franchises.
That's actually not a bad idea.
And if you're going to go Matthew Vaughn, he's capable of doing something that's not 100%, dark and not 100% light.
Well, that was a big thing that I think that's a good choice. Let's say he would be our head writer, so to speak. What I like about the Vaughn choice is he can play in both worlds. He had to play in both worlds. What I hated
Yeah.
the most, which I one of the reasons I think Batman vs Superman doesn't work, is Zack Snyder's visual style. Oddly enough, as much as I hate it, works really well for Batman because all he wants to
Yeah.
do is recreate late '80s Batman that is one of the most popularized versions of Batman. He really wants to
There's only
go that level.
there's only one thing. There's only one aspect of the Batman stuff that doesn't work for me, which is like the really modern house. You know,
Yeah.
I would prefer it to be more like a classic Batman, like '89, where it's like a gothic mansion.
Yeah.
I
Well,
just that adds so much more atmosphere than a modern
well,
sleek house.
so that's the thing. We're gonna get into that because I have a lot. You know, I always have thoughts on Batman. Um,
Plus, also the whole idea is Batman is old money. He's not like a self-made person.
right. I mean, that's the greatest issue. It's one of the greatest. I shouldn't say one of the greatest issues. I have so many great issues with this film, and which is why we're trying to fix it right here in a just basic
Also,
talk
how
conversation.
long is the how long is the ultimate cut?
3 hours and 3 minutes.
Fuck.
It was long.
When I pulled up the theatrical and it was 2:30, I was like, fuck me. I do not want to watch this. Like, and then when you look at the Justice League, Zack Snyder's Justice League,
Yeah.
that fucker is 4 hours long.
Mm-hmm.
Are you really incapable of making a tight, compact movie? Movies do not need to be that long, especially superhero stuff.
Well, that's the problem. Zack Snyder is just. Sorry to anyone who's a big Zack Snyder fan, but He's a masturbatory director. This is what he does. He is
Oh, that's a great word for it. Yeah.
this is what he does. He's constantly milking himself. It's what he's doing. When he makes a movie, he's making a movie for his sensibilities. It's what he does. He does not make a movie with mass appeal. He does not make a movie, he does not make a movie in which grand audiences of the size you need for these superhero films are going to be fun.
Just
For
for
everybody.
just for curiosity, I pulled out 300 to see how long it is,
Was it
and it's
147?
116 minutes.
Yeah. And
That's perfect.
that's perfect. And like that's what I'm saying is Zack Snyder, that works really well for 300. Everybody who watches 300 for the most part, unless it's just not your cup of tea, adores 300 because it's a very faithful adaptation of a niche comic book. And it's just let's
Yeah,
get blood, guts, and style. That's what that is. That's why you don't go with a Zack Snyder in this, which is why I'd rather go with the Matthew Vaughn, who wants to do he wants to play in both worlds. When you look at X-Men First Class, he's playing with dark elements with Magneto and Sebastian Shaw a lot. But then at the
yeah.
same
I mean,
time,
any movie that has concentration camp scenes is going to be pretty dark.
right. And then but he can still do the light bright of the founding of the X-Men. And
Yeah,
it's incredibly interesting and exciting, and that's why when you're like Matthew Vaughn, I was like, we don't need to discuss that more. I'd go with Matthew Vaughn because
yeah,
I can't
and X Men
stand
First Class is X Men First Class is like a perfect length. I think it's like 2 hours and 10 minutes.
right. It gets to the point very quickly on what it's doing,
Yes.
and what I cannot stand is the visual style Zack Snyder has works pretty well with Batman, right? But it does not work for Superman at all. It's so dark and it's so gritty that it doesn't work for Superman. Superman needs to be
Yeah.
light and bright and hopeful. That's the whole fucking point. It's not
Yeah.
supposed to be death and despair all the fucking time.
The things I wrote down for the first scene, like the very opening of it, is I would change the entire tone in cinematography. So I'm cutting out. There's not going to be any over exaggerated like slow mo masturbatory shots anymore.
Nope.
Cut that shit out.
Yep.
And then I'm gonna cut all the dumb like emo voiceover of poems and shit. Cut that out. Um, and then I said I would keep like the gothic kind of like gritty style of Batman, but then you kind of have to add an opposing style to the Superman stuff.
it would almost be
That
it
way,
would almost be interesting if you had two directors of photography on this that matched each other enough, but you're just like you do light and
yeah,
bright, you do dark and gritty.
that might be a challenge, but that is something you could do because you need to like visually set up these are two opposing forces. The whole point is Batman versus Superman.
And that's the thing. The flaw in this movie is why do these two need to fight immediately? It doesn't make any sense.
They don't.
And the ultimate cut makes a good enough reason as to why they're motivated to fight. It's still not good enough. But
Well, I think they kind of hit on something where it's like the scene where Batman's running into Metropolis.
oh, it's
I
phenomenal.
like I like that scene. I would keep almost all of it.
I would too. That is
The
a great. That shows Batman is. It's the same thing I loved about the Batman, which got Ab to finally say. I remember watching the Batman, and we got out, and Ab said, "I got something to say." I said, "Well, let us get out of the theater just in case it's a spoiler thing, because I don't want to be an asshole." Which fuckers didn't do when I came out of Deadpool, or when I was going into Deadpool and they were coming out of Deadpool, and I was fucking mad. But nonetheless,
uh,
classless. Fucking talk spoilers when you're outside in the parking lot. Don't fucking do it when you're in the
Yeah.
theater and people are walking into the next theater to go see the same movie. But nonetheless. But I remember Ab saying, this is the first time I ever connected with that character. Because when you see Robert
Of
Pattinson's,
Batman.
yeah, of the Batman, and it's Robert Pattinson,
Okay.
he's got the flare going and he's helping people out of the water. I was like, that's the whole point. He's the one motherfucker, when everyone's running away, he's the one motherfucker running in. That is the whole point of that guy. That even when
Yeah.
he's his dark fear tactics and he's more brutal than he probably has to be, at the end of the day, when no one will step up, he's the one that will step up and do it. That's great stuff at the beginning here. And that's a good, really good representation of the Batman that Zack Snyder created. But
Hmm.
then he wants to have him kill everybody, and it makes no sense.
Yeah. The and then the last thing I wrote down is for the beginning. You don't need Batman's origin story again. Literally everyone on the face of the planet knows his parents were gunned down.
So here's the thing. I love that they told that in that quick a fashion, though. I like the fact that the opening credits
Oh,
get you
sure.
there.
I appreciate that it's only 2 minutes and not 15. But like everyone has seen Batman Begins.
Right.
You know Batman's origin story.
Although you do, you.
Yeah, I bet even mom knows Batman's origin story.
I mean, if our mom didn't know Batman's origin story, I would be majorly disappointed because she's been surrounded by Batman shit her entire life because of
Yes,
us, but
but she's
specifically
also
me.
hyper unconnected with pop culture.
Yeah, that's pretty true. So it's more so. I have no issue keeping that in. I have no issue. I think the Metropolis sequence pretty much is perfect. If
That's where I would start.
I would honestly, I would just do cold start immediately. Cold open. You're in Metropolis and you're seeing. I'd like to see one crash of Superman across with Zod, and then you see the helicopter coming down, and you see Bruce going like,
Yeah,
"What
that's
the
where I would
fuck?"
start. Because then you're obviously in Metropolis. This is obviously a flashback ultimately, but then you're establishing Bruce as a character.
I would then go to an opening credits with that because I love the tease of it doing. He's helping a kid who just lost their parents. I love that that
Mm-hmm.
goes into an opening credits where we set up
Yeah,
Batman, but I wouldn't just do the only origin story. If you're telling a Batman that's, do we like the approach of this Batman is 20 years into his career? I don't necessarily think that's the best thing when you're starting a universe.
I would agree. It's kind of nonsensical when it comes to building a universe.
Right. So my thought process is this is they do it really well in the comics over like one page. I would do 5 minutes of a big opening credits and flashback sequence. I know that sounds really crazy for opening credits, but that's why it continues. Go through, you see the shot, you see the next shot. Bruce is just distraught. And then little 10, 15-second snippets of his journey. How did he get to where he is? Why is Alfred important to him? Show Alfred training him how to be a marksman. You show Alfred teaching him field medicine because that's what Alfred actually did. You can show him across the world globetrotting, finding all these teachers, using all that stuff. So then immediately you're like, oh, this is Batman.
Yeah,
We understand
I
and we understand his motivations against Superman, and we understand his motivations as to why he became who he was, and we now know this is the guy.
I the other thing I wrote down at of the beginning is if I absolutely had to keep the Martha thing, like if someone was like, no, this has to be in the fucking movie, I would just cut all of the flashback out except like the one shot of Martha dying on the street, you
Yeah.
know? Just keep that image, and then you can show that throughout the movie as Batman haunted by this image. And then at the end, when Superman says Martha, which also that's
Sir.
bad writing at the end.
Yep.
But then when he says Martha, then you can flash to that image of Batman's Martha dying on the street, and you understand, oh, his mom's name is Martha, and you don't have to spell it out. People will understand the cutting those two things together.
Well, I think what would be really interesting is this: is in that cold open, let's change one thing. Instead of kid pointing up and being like, "Where's your mom?" and she points to the building, have her in the wreckage, laying kind of like prone, like Martha is. Let's take the tie. I don't think that's a stupid tie. It's a stupid way it's executed.
Yeah.
So
Oh, you're saying the kid is laying like Martha, and then you flash to Martha.
no, I'm saying the kid is, you have Batman, he saves the kid in the wreckage. You automatically see Batman's a hero even when he's Bruce Wayne. But he's like, okay, where's your mom? Literally just pan right there. Mom's prone in the wreckage.
Okay,
And then immediately he does that, and that gets us to the credit scene where you can start with Martha dead on the ground, the other shot coming through, or just like the shot ringing through his ears, and you see Bruce on his feet with his dead parents, looking at his dead mom, looking at his dead dad, and immediately you're just like, this is why it's important. He's reminded of this every fucking time there's a disaster. He sees the most traumatic event of his life over and over and over again.
Yeah, but that's only if we had to keep the Martha thing.
I think it's a good uniting tie. I really do. It's just so poorly executed.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. The one thing I said I would change about the Metropolis scene with Bruce is instead of having him call whoever that was in Wayne Tower,
Yeah.
that like pretty much a non-character,
Anonymous Jack.
Yeah, I said I would have him call Alfred, who could be in Wayne Tower in Gotham, because he's telling him to evacuate the building.
Yeah.
And then it sets up like 5 different things. You set up Alfred. You set up that Bruce cares about his employees, and then it also sets up the fact that this whole thing that Bruce is seeing is alien. It's like a force that humanity has absolutely no shot against.
Yeah.
And it's going to cause widespread fear. So
I'll build on your idea because I like that idea. What I do is show Bruce going into Batman mode, where instead of calling Alfred, he calls both Alfred and Lucius Fox. Because then one of the best things about the Dark Knight trilogy
is Lucius Fox in the comics?
Yes. That's one of the best.
Okay, I didn't know that.
The Dark Knight trilogy pulls a lot from the 70s comic books, which people focus on 60s and then they focus on 80s. They don't focus on the 70s very much. But the 70s is a lot of good stuff baked into it. Such as like the penthouse downtown. That happens in the 70s because it's like, well, if he's fighting crime every night, why would he want to be outside of town where he has to run in? Why wouldn't he want to be in the center of the action ready to go? Like, that's why the penthouse from The Dark Knight is a thing. So, you already have built-in cachet with the Lucius character, and it already helps you establish, okay, we understand Bruce is rich, we understand that's how he does all this stuff, but, like, how could he really pull half this shit off? Lucius helps him. So what I would do is...
So then you have Lucius in Wayne Tower.
I would have Lucius in Wayne Tower saying, Lucius, get the fuck out of the building, get everybody out. And you have Alfred also on that call, and you're like, Alfred, I need you to send as many of Wayne Tech's drone vehicles or whatever project you want to add and tease. You just say, I need you to get as many medical supplies here as possible. I need you to get as many of these vehicles in because these people are hurt and they're gonna die. I need to get them out. Because then immediately you show...
And that also gives Bruce like an immediate motivation against Superman
Right.
is like this person is like he literally could become a god on Earth if
Right.
he wanted.
Exactly.
So it's like it's yeah, so he'll do pretty much anything he can do to save other people who he sees could be in danger.
Right. And that's the
Which
thing.
is the central idea of a whole superhero.
Right. And that's the thing is I think one of the things Man of Steel always was criticized for was it was just fight, 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 fight. And it was clear they wanted that for the motivation for Batman now. The problem is that it just puts Superman in such a bad light.
Yeah.
If I were going to try to find a central theme, I would just say the memories of the past are haunting you. Because what I would do after we have a good cold open, we have a whole sequence establishing Batman. The first time you see Superman, instead of going to the desert and fighting terrorists and saving Lois and all that shit, which is fine. It's not a bad sequence. It just it doesn't serve, especially in the theatrical cut when you take off half the mystery and the framing of Superman. Because the Ultimate Edition does a good job of showing, well, why is he in the desert? Well, Lex Luthor's trying to frame him to make everybody question his godhood. So
Yeah.
they're trying to make him a hated figure. That makes sense on the Lex Luthor part. But what I would do is cut all that shit out. And I would say he's haunted of the past. And then you can show extra clips of it where you can see Superman on the fringe of Metropolis, like throwing Zod back out of Metropolis, and Zod takes it back into the fight. Where you can see Superman's like actively trying to get them out. So you can show
Well,
even in his weaker moments, Superman knows, oh, I need to save people. He's just not Superman enough at the time to figure out how to do that
yeah.
the best way.
The thing that I said I would add is after it would take place like pretty much directly after he kills Zod.
Yeah.
You have Superman, you know, going around Metropolis looking to save people who are trapped and stuff.
Yeah.
So he doesn't. It doesn't show him like wallowing in self pity because he killed Zod, who ultimately he didn't give a shit about anyways. Like you show he's still a force for good,
Yes.
and ultimately, yeah, he's not going to wallow in self pity. He's going to go and continue to save as many people as possible.
Right.
And then that also, if you set it up right with styles and tones, um, it kind of shows like Superman's doing everything out of hope, and Batman's kind of doing it stuff out of fear of Superman,
Yeah.
which is directly it correlates with the darker gothic style.
Right. And that's the thing is, again, I'd put another callback in immediately. And I would stop it for a while. This would be the last one I do, because if you're going to get 3 back-to-back dead women, that kind of sucks. But you could see it where I would have in the wreckage. It doesn't have to be one woman because that's a little too on the nose, but you could have a whole group of people just laying there prone in the wreckage. And you can do the different way where he's haunted by that moment. Like Superman's haunted by the fact that he let people die. But he can go, you can do the heartbeat sound effect and be like, oh, I hear somebody in there. So he sees somebody prone laying there just like Martha, just like the dead mom that the kid sees. But then you can see him like ripping the rubble up and finding 3 or 4 people that are under the rubble. They're hurt, but they're not dead.
Yeah.
And then you can go,
also,
Superman's here to help.
Yeah, that would also set up the fact that Superman can hear things like the smallest noise.
Right.
Because there's multiple times in this movie that they use that, and you can. And most people are, I'm assuming, able to just assume like, oh, he can just hear the smallest noises. But like that's setting up immediately that he could do that. It's a power he has. The thing that they don't do enough of in this movie for me is they don't show that Superman, or they don't show that Clark is like a pretty much just a normal human who just happens to be Superman as well.
Yeah.
Like you need to show him being human because that's ultimately what's going to change Bruce's mind about Clark slash Superman
Yep.
is seeing the humanity in him.
Well, also, the audience needs to see that. Did you notice, like, I have a real problem with not the music itself, because the Hans Zimmer music throughout Batman vs. Superman is phenomenal. You can't diss the soundtrack at all.
It's a little too somber for me in the Superman stuff.
That was what I was going to say is, did you notice at the beginning, they don't play any of the hopeful notes of the music that they wrote for Superman. They only play the darker stuff. And it's like, you can't show these images of hope where you're trying to convince the audience that Superman is a beacon of hope and light in the world. But then pair it with this, like, dreadful music.
Yeah, even like the little montage of him saving people, you know, like in the hurricane and all that shit.
Yeah.
It is so somber and dour.
Yep.
And obviously Hans Zimmer is like one of the greatest
Composers of all
living
time.
composers.
Yeah.
He can do any tone you want him to.
Yep.
Like the perfect example of this is his very last theme in The Lion King, when Simba's like going up Pride Rock.
Yeah.
That is like such a hopeful, joyful theme, and then you get none of that in this movie.
And that's where the big things that we need to hit on right now are, what are our goals? We've already said it. Batman is dark. He's doing things out of fear. Superman is hope. He's doing things out of the hope for humanity and the hope to get better.
Yeah. And then if you're going to keep Lex Luthor as the ultimate villain, he can be another side of this. Like, he can be like the rational, you know, aspect of it. So you get fear, you get hope, you get rational. Because ultimately, that's what Lex Luthor's supposed to be, right?
Pretty much. So here's the thing. What I would say on that is, it's not bad to have
You know a lot more about the comic book character.
Oh yeah. Well, the modern take on Lex Luthor that's getting pretty successful. Okay. Because, you know, you have your classic Lex Luthor, I'm evil scientist, businessman, whatever. When Lex Luthor becomes far better and more popular is when he is megamaniacal businessman, but is tied into everything. And you show how intelligent he is, where Lex Luthor is Bruce's only rival for smarts on the planet. Where, like, Lex Luthor is the only person, outside of a few other, like, really big entities in the DC universe, no one can outthink Batman. Lex Luthor's the only one that can kind of do that.
So he's like an evil genius businessman, or is he a scientist?
He's an evil genius businessman, but also, like, he's kind of almost self-made business, where he's the one that was, like, he's involved in the tech development. He's like, think like, you know, have you ever seen clips of, like, Elon Musk, where he kind of goes a little bit into science and everyone just goes, oh, he's a genius. Elon Musk isn't really that guy, but, like, that outward public appearance, if it were actually real, where he was like, no, I'm smarter than all of you. There's a great one. I think I brought it up in another podcast. It's in an early Swamp Thing, where Swamp Thing essentially just, like, takes over Gotham, and the Gotham City officials hire Lex Luthor, and they're like, we need fucking help. And he's like, I will give you 1 minute of my time for $1 million, which in the 80s is, you know, was big money, right? And he's like, you have 1 minute. I will do everything I can to solve your problem for 1 minute.
Yeah, because in the 78 Superman, he's just kind of a businessman, like an evil businessman.
Right, and that's the problem with the 78 Lex Luthor. And so, and it's a little too zany, obviously. So, What I would be
Yeah.
doing is, I think it was really smart to show he's involved in the government with contracts right away. I thought that was a good
I
idea.
yeah. I like most of the government stuff in
I would go with stuff of this nature where um, I would do almost I would do something like this. Batman and Superman are in the middle. It's almost like you're making a cross, which is really kind of strange for me to say, but whatever. Do Have we made the decision we're keeping Wonder Woman in this movie? Because if we are,
I viewed this movie as I had to.
so what I would do with Wonder Woman instead is this. The only benefit you have with Batman and not establishing him as much is the fact that Batman's the most well established character in all of fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's so abundantly clear what Batman is, who he wants to be, all that shit. In our cold open and our credits scene, we've already established this is Batman, right?
Yeah.
So what I would do is I would have Bruce and Clark in the middle, Batman and Superman in the middle, where they're on opposite ends of the spectrum as to what their motivations are, but they're trying to do the right thing. And Batman sees, you're a threat, I need to take you out. Or figure it out at the very least. Whereas Superman is saying, I'm here to save people, but there's collateral damage to that. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
learning how to do better. So what I would have is Wonder Woman is the sign of hope to pull them up, and Lex is the force to pull them down. And
Yeah.
so I would almost say, because she's this ancient Amazon that's ageless, she's learned all these things over years. You can go into that without a lot of her backstory and just go, like, you can see her, she's the one infiltrating a lot of stuff. She's the wallflower half the time that they're not paying attention to yet. She's watching from afar. Superman, all of a sudden, Superman sees a building falling and he can't, like, he saves the person and he sees that, giant rubble's going to fall on a whole group. But then some of the rubble doesn't fall all the way, and he's just like, I didn't
Yeah.
do it. And then it's like
I
Wonder Woman's in the distance, just being like, he's got to get better. We need to help him.
yeah.
And she's
I
hopeful to get
hate
him better.
I hate the take they do on Wonder Woman in this, where it's like she hasn't been involved in the world.
It's so dumb.
Like,
It's so anti her character.
yeah, it's so, and it's just like um, antithetical to what a hero is.
Mm-hmm. It's a huge problem. That's the biggest problem with the Wonder Woman franchise Warner Brothers gave us, was that
Yeah.
the period piece Wonder Woman is phenomenal. It's a great take. But then I walked away from humanity for 100 years. You're like, hold on. You have the power to help everyone, and we're already seeing you are Miss Naive, light bright, help everyone for the sake of helping everybody because you love the world, but you won't help it?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
you're no better. And that's where I would say is that's where you can involve all three at the end, where you go, Batman, you're brutal, and you just believe the law doesn't matter to you, even though you're going after Superman for thinking the same thing. You can see Lex breaking everybody down. Like, I've known about you, Wonder Woman, and you keep helping everyone, but you won't be the one in the shadows. Maybe if you were the one that was trying to play God, I wouldn't have to do this. I wouldn't have to fight all of you. Superman, you can't do anything correctly in the fact that when you intervene, we just have a God figure who can't do what God needs to do. I'm going to do it for you. So you have all three have these flaws that they need to figure out into becoming the universe that you're creating, and Lex is the one pointing out all these flaws and figuring out how to do it. Whereas Wonder Woman's the one that's seeing the two opposite ends of the spectrum and being, I need to be the middle ground. I need to unify them. I don't want to. Mm-hmm. I don't need to. I need to bring them up to where they should be, not where they are.
Yeah. Yeah, I wrote down, like, ultimately, what I would go for is it would boil down to like pretty much the same argument of what do you do to save the most amount of people? And then with Clark, you get um, like he's just another person. He lives a pretty normal life, but then when he breaks out of that life to become Superman, he's doing the best he can to save as many people as possible. He's just doing what he thinks is right.
Right.
And then Bruce sees Superman as a threat, but he also sees like, okay, this could become super ugly if something goes wrong. So it's like Superman would be optimism and Batman would be pessimism.
Yeah.
Really.
It,
And I think that's a fairly like um, real interpretation of the characters, isn't it?
yeah. No. The other thing is this is Batman. One of the ways that they get around him being perfect, especially in the '90s, you get a lot of the Bat God, who just like knows everything. He is everything, and up until the early tens, you don't see a lot of Batman being the problem. When he is the problem, it's out of preparation. Where they're just like, how could you prep for us going rogue? And he's like, we're the most powerful force on the universe in the universe. If you do go rogue and we're not prepared, everybody's dead. So that's why I'm doing it. So even when he's kind of like put in the villain spot temporarily, it's always out of like, he's got a point. Like, we fight these alternate universe Supermen that are evil. Who was prepared for that? I was. I made sure we could finish the fight. So then when, we have to look at the contingency of what happens if, Red Kryptonite comes into play and he starts acting like a crazy person. What happens if you're influenced by, a Greek, god and you go rogue? What happens if Green Lantern is influenced by fear and turns into fucking Parallax? We have to be prepared for all of those contingencies.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's Batman looking at the world in a pessimistic way.
Yeah. And that's where
and it's just,
you should do that, where you just go,
and people
is he right?
People will recognize that as a truth of the world.
Right.
Like there are so many stories of politicians and world leaders, starting off as like, a force for good, a real force for good.
Yeah.
But then quickly, when they become powerful, it's very easy to have that switch.
Mm-hmm. And that's the greatest issue.
Yeah. Oh, and then the other thing I wrote down is like if you wanted to go like more metaphorical and like kind of experimental, which Zack Snyder does like in little hints in this movie where like that flashback where young Bruce is like floating up with the bats.
So dumb.
If you want to do that, if you want to do that stuff and be more experimental, that's fine with me. But don't do it in like 2 parts of the movie and that's it.
Yep.
Like if you're gonna do that, commit.
You have to commit, and he doesn't commit. So here's where obviously we can't talk about every scene. That would be a whole nother episode of us rewriting this entire movie.
Well, technically I could because I have those notes.
Of course you do, and I'm be very excited to see that. That'll be a fun project one day. Is when we start rewriting movies, or at least scene synopsis of movies. But what I would do is we need to play the counterbalance. Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Lex.
Yeah, they need to be opposing views and tones.
So what I would do is, for instance, just basic ideas here. How does Superman counteract Batman? Lex Luthor releases some of the villains from the inmates through his connections from Arkham. And you get just a bunch of villains you know, but you're not going to use in a bigger context. Maybe
Yeah.
he's already fought Bane, and you don't need a full Bane movie. So you go,
Yeah.
Bane's on the
The
loose.
the mid the mid tier villains.
Those mid tier guys that you want, like Killer Croc. I would love if you did Killer Croc, and everyone's like, why would you do that? It's like, because immediately
Oh,
you put into the world the things that aren't tangible in Batman's reality. Where, like, you don't want a Mr. Freeze that's just a scientist that does cold weapons. You want the one who has to stay in sub zero temperatures and is completely haunted by that. You need the.
that's probably another good question we should ask is how realistic are we going for? Because
And
like in Marvel, you kind of have like mysticism is kind of a real thing in that world.
yeah, it should be in the DC universe as well. And that's another thing that
Okay.
I would grip with was when I've toyed with this idea of fixing the DC universe or writing my own version of the DC universe in movies for almost 20 years now at this point. My greatest dream job ever would be to be an architect of a full DC or just strictly Batman cinematic universe, right? When I look at how I would personally do it, not everything withstanding, is I would show the god Superman and Batman going, this is a fucking problem.
Mm-hmm.
But I would immediately
But then,
introduce the parts of Batman that are mystic, weird, science gone wrong. Like have Killer Croc in there, and everyone goes, "There's a fucking crocodile guy in this shit now." But you can have Batman fight him and be like, you know, what I would love to do is maybe show how intelligent Batman is, where one of the villains gets loose, right? We can use the building example coming down, or just there's collateral damage that Batman can't deal with because he's saving all the people, right? And then magically, it's held together with the lasso. Just something. It's interceded at the end. Wonder Woman is always the one coming to help give the counterbalance. And then you can kind of go through being like, Bruce, I know who you are. He's like, I know. Say, oh, you want to call me on my shit right now? What's up, Diana Prince? Wish you'd actually show up in the world. Call her on her shit right away, and just he really does that. And then bring her back to the Batcave, and you can go through files, and she's like, what was that creature? He's just like, for an all-knowing, ageless being, you don't know a whole lot of shit. He's like, I got sewer crocodiles running around in this bitch that kill people. I've got people leaving riddles on the street. I've got a mad clown running around on the streets every chance he gets. I've got a guy who, in the sakes of saving his wife, is now frozen himself half to death. This is what
mm-hmm.
I'm dealing with in Gotham. You can show him just in little case files almost, and you can have that counterbalance of you could be better, Bruce, and he's like, you could actually do something, Diana.
so you're saying not everything is going to be based in science, which seems to be what they're kind of going for.
I don't. Not everything can just be scientific. Like that's my issue.
Yeah.
Is when you my greatest issue with both the Dark Knight trilogy and the current Batman series of Matt Reeves is when you do hyper realistic Batman, which obviously works, you take away some of the tools, or you take away some of the places in the sandbox that you can play that make Batman really cool. Where you can't have Ra's al Ghul as a 600-year-old entity who is mad for power, who started off as this great force of saying, I saw the world starting to burn and I needed to save it. So I started giving
Mm-hmm.
away parts of my. He doesn't really do this, but metaphorically, I give away parts of my soul every time I revive myself to make sure that this world doesn't go to shit. And you can just go, that's good counterbalance to Batman. This 600-year-old entity that knows all this shit, but yet he's so willing to kill to save it, where he's just like, how can you save
Yeah.
humanity if you're so willing to kill it, right? Whereas,
Yeah. That would also give Batman more character because you can show him kind of being headstrong in the way of like, oh, everything is based in science. I can figure this out.
And that's another thing that I like about it is he is constantly having his beliefs challenged. He's constantly, you can in that montage that I was talking about, an opening credits montage, you can start going into he's already beaten the Joker. Joker isn't, outside of weird chemical reaction, Joker isn't some crazy monster or anything.
Yeah.
He's just a man. You can go into Riddler and you can go, oh, Riddles. I outsmarted him. But that's just man. Now, here's the reason Superman is a problem. This is an alien god that isn't theoretically supposed to be possible.
Yeah.
But I've solved all these problems using my wits and my intelligence and my resources.
Yeah.
I'm going to solve this problem now.
Even though I guess technically it kind of is scientific, like the thought that Superman can be like repowered by the sun,
mm-hmm.
That's ultimately like a magical kind of thinking.
Correct. He's a solar battery.
Yeah, it's kind. I mean, I guess if you did it correctly, you could do the two differing tones, like Batman is science, Superman is magic.
Right.
Like you could do that, but it's not ultimately going to be satisfying, I don't think.
Right, and that's where I would go.
You need to kind of pick a tone which Marvel did.
Yes, so in which I would go, doors open. You can do anything. You can do anything. Yeah. And
also, the best thing about rewriting this is that the 2017 Suicide Squad does not exist.
Oh yeah, 16 doesn't exist then. So inherently, that's where I go. Okay, Batman, reliance on science. He's gonna, God damn it, he's gonna figure it out. And Diana's constantly trying to pull him into, you don't have to do this. Because you can even have within the first 20 minutes, if you want to introduce Lex and Wonder Woman and Batman, you could have, a villain, out and about, right? They're there, and Batman has to intercede to save it, but he's also trying to steal kryptonite. He's just like, I'm gonna go take that for myself. Diana intervenes as well. They go back to the Batcave, and he's just like, well, clearly you know who I am, so what's the point in hiding this? And then she's like, why were you there? And he just gives a little shard of kryptonite. He's just like, I don't know. You tell me.
Well, also, I wrote down, like, the whole thing that Diana is going after Luthor for is because he has proof that she's, like, this eternal being, right? Like, why not have Bruce/Batman give her, like, the photo of her in, I don't know what year it is, 1918, 17? Like, return it to her. That way you're showing Diana and Bruce connecting, and a friendship starts, which ultimately you need going forward.
That's a good point. I mean, if we want to keep that tie, another thing you could do is he first doesn't know, and he uses his detective skills, and he's just like, well,
exactly.
I was fucking with LexCorp because I needed that kryptonite that they needed. Well, yeah. I found some files that I found pretty fucking interesting.
And ultimately, I just don't think Zack Snyder understands a lot of things on a basic level. Like, Batman is supposed to be a detective. Show him using his detective skills to solve things.
Well, that's the thing is he shows him breaking in and for a decryption. And then he shows him decrypting the files, but he's not showing
But he doesn't show the process of it. He shows the aftermath of the process of it.
Right. You have to. That's the whole point. Is it would be so much better. It's almost like I don't want Lex Luthor in this movie, but you need a villain. You need a uniting force. Or you need
I actually don't. If you're gonna have him, I think it's a good thing to set up for the future as well,
Yeah.
because you're not gonna kill him off or anything in the first one.
Right. So what I would another way I might approach it is
Actually, that's another good question. Who's the ultimate villain we want to build up towards?
the ultimate villain we want to build towards.
Because Marvel, I mean, it took a while, but eventually it was Thanos.
So here are your choices. You look at DC.
Also, what's the first hint of Thanos? Do you know?
The first hint of Thanos is at the end of Avengers.
Which is
It's the post-credit scene
the
of Avengers
fourth?
of just
Is that the
Avengers.
fourth in the MCU?
Fifth. Because you get Iron Man, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, actually sixth, because Iron Man 2, Captain Thor, and Captain America are five before Avengers.
Okay, so I would say we shouldn't hint at any huge villain.
I actually might, but it's all about where you want to go. For instance,
Yeah.
if you want to play Lex Luthor as I will outdo God by any means necessary. One interesting thing that they've been doing lately is to play the character is Lex Luthor eventually joins the Justice League with a very, very, very contentious relationship with Superman. Because then you can see why Superman always is willing to like try to give him a chance. He's like, I see you are always trying to do good when it doesn't come to me. I don't know what your personal beef with me is, but every time you do something in the world, when it doesn't involve me, it's actually very good. It's trying to help people. But when it involves me, that's when you become a fucking psychopath.
Does he fight?
Yeah, he has this whole like super suit, mech suit thing. Do you remember Injustice, the video game?
Uh,
That mech suit is from the comics.
yeah.
So,
Okay.
what you could do is you can play it of two ways. You can eventually get to the face turn of Lex Luthor, where he doesn't like Superman, but he's like, fuck. I started something in motion, and now I have to help fix it. So if you want to tease something, I would tease Brainiac. So what I would do is, at the end of this film, obviously...
Can you explain who Brainiac is? I only know him by name. I know nothing
Okay,
about
so
the
Brainiac is a alien artificial intelligence, like super intelligence being. He also has a rad spaceship that's also a skull, and it's super fucking cool. But Brainiac, both physically and mentally, is pretty much equal to Superman because he's an ancient technology from outer space. What's also cool about Brainiac is he's a scientist that's like his greatest goal is to have all knowledge. But he does it in the evil like AI version where he's like, if I allow others to have knowledge, that doesn't compute because that means I can't have all knowledge because others have knowledge. So what Brainiac does, the more zany comic book shit is, he has like alien technology that can shrink planets or shrink cities, and he will take a city, shrink it into like a glass bottle, and he takes that as his specimen of a planet, and then he'll just like destroy a planet. So to have ties back to Krypton, he has the bottle city of Kandor, which is one of the biggest cities on Krypton before it explodes. So you could do a whole Supergirl intro if you really wanted to with the bottle city of Kandor. But
okay, so let's say we'll do a Brainiac end credit scene.
very much so. So one of the things that you could do with a Brainiac is Lex can kind of shoot out a beacon into outer space because once you establish that he's this like super genius, but is also crazy to take out Superman. One of the things that you could do easily is he shot a beacon out into outer space. He's just like, I need to find Superman's weakness. and he's just like, I need to find this Kryptonian weakness, and then just through time and space, who gets that signal? Brainiac, and you're like, fuck, like now we have a real threat. Plus, then what you can have is you can have all these bigger level heroes that can play in space or can play with bigger themes, such as Green Lantern, a sequel to Superman. Really, you could have it with Wonder Woman, but it doesn't necessarily fit. You could have Cyborg, Martian Manhunter. You could have Brainiac start manipulating the universe to his will and start sending threats to threaten Earth, and then new heroes come about, or Superman comes about and saves them from it, and it's all a test to see what am I actually up against. So Brainiac has a logical reason to go to Earth and win right away. So you're building to this bigger villain of Brainiac, which is really nice. You have a power level that can counter Superman and an intelligence level that can counter Batman.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just take 1 minute. What would be the slate? You know how Marvel does like
Yeah.
announcement slates?
Mm-hmm.
What would be the most logical step forward? It'd be Man of Steel, then this, Wonder Woman.
I would do Wonder Woman, Batman. Actually, I would save Batman. I'll do it in order if I could. I'll put it in order once I do it all. You need a Wonder Woman. You need a Batman.
Yeah.
Green Lantern.
Okay.
Flash.
Okay. Green Lantern also makes sense because you can set up a more like celestial
Yep.
thing.
Green Lantern's a badass. We need Hal Jordan.
Oh no, we need the black one.
Why wouldn't you just do both?
Okay, there you go. I'm fine with that then.
Hal Jordan is the best Green Lantern, but Jon Stewart is also incredibly popular for good reason, and he's an incredibly fun character. And there's two Green Lanterns to every space sector, so it could be almost a odd couple buddy cop movie if you really wanted to do that. But that's a different story. But
that'd be fun.
What we can do so if we're going to continue this slate, you need Green Lantern, you need Flash. I say you go Aquaman.
But are you saying all these get solo movies before we do a Justice League?
Yes. Because you're getting essentially Civil War in this movie. You're getting Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman.
Yeah. Trying to think of what did it go in real life? Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Wonder Woman, Suicide Squad.
No, it's Batman vs Superman, Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman, Justice League.
Okay, yeah, I would definitely add at least 2 more before Justice League.
So here's the thing: you're already getting a Justice League tease in Batman vs Superman. So why you can take your time and build to that, right? So
yeah.
What you can do is you got Man of Steel as your start. Then you go Batman vs Superman. I go Wonder Woman to follow up on that one. Then I'm going to go, after that, I'm going to go Green Lantern. So you get back to your Brainiac kind of focus without knowing it's full-on Brainiac yet. Or the characters don't know it's full-on Brainiac yet, but the audience is starting to get the tease of Brainiac. Then we go back terrestrial, we go Flash. I'm going to go Aquaman. And then I'm going to do Batman. But the whole time, I'm going to have Batman in almost every single... I'm going to have Batman in almost every single movie. I also might put another Superman in there as well. But Batman would be my last one. One, it's going to be your hottest property no matter what because it's Batman. But you're establishing characters, and you can do kind of the MCU thing where if Brainiac is sending these essentially test subjects to figure out how strong Earth is, right? Wonder Woman can just you don't even have to talk about it again. You can just say, "Oh, this is the origin story of Wonder Woman," and she's out and about, and then you can end that movie with um, her, Superman, and Batman getting together and being like, "We need to start finding, like
Yeah.
something's out there."
Well, in the Green Lantern movie, you could also add Superman because he's capable of like intergalactic travel. I guess you would say.
Yeah. So, but you can do that, but then I don't have an issue with that. But where I go with that is use the detective that's bankable all the time. So at the end of Wonder Woman, you can do origin story Wonder Woman just like they did. It changed a little bit, but just like they did. But now we know Wonder
Actually,
Woman.
wouldn't yeah, I wouldn't actually change that much about the first Wonder Woman.
I
I
wouldn't
really
either.
like that movie.
It's a great movie. Um, and you go through, and you just at the end of it, you have the three of them coming together, and you can say you can have Bruce saying, "I combed through all of LexCorp's files. One of the things Lex did before we got him out of the game is he sent a beacon into space, and
Yeah,
he included Kryptonian information. You can see Superman go, fuck, like we're screwed
yeah.
now, and it just be like,
I
we
would
need this team up worked. We need to find more people.
yeah. I would also add an aspect to Lex's story where he's almost like a shadow government, almost
Mm-hmm.
like he's secretly in charge. Because then him having all these files on superheroes and stuff makes 10 times more sense if it's a government thing rather
You
than
can at least say it's an anomaly.
just
He's
left.
just like I have scoured the globe and I'm finding anomalies everywhere. And they don't have to be all superheroes. You can
Yeah,
say they're metahumans, and some are villains or some are heroes. But then
yeah.
that way, what you can do,
But it makes 10 times more sense for it to be a government thing.
yeah. So you can at least say he's part of a shadow. He has a pseudo government agency essentially to himself. Um,
Yeah,
but the way I would do it then is, as this slate is Wonder Woman's her origin, and we go, oh shit, Lex sent a beacon. We need to find new members of the Justice League, or we need to found the Justice League. You don't have to say it by name, but whatever. Next one, Green Lantern. You start going to space. You get back to the big threat of Brainiac in some way, shape, or form of a rogue alien entity has come, and Green Lantern's got to solve the problem. Um, you can make a cameo of Superman if you want to, but the other thing you can do is you can just have continual intervention from Batman doing detective work, where you don't see Batman being a badass. He's not here to steal Green Lantern's movie, but you can just have like you can have Green Lantern. That was there's something more to this than meets the eye kind of thing. And Batman's like, well, what was it? And starts getting some explanations. Okay,
hmm
he's like, well, he said something of like the alien or the threat said something about a mission here. He's like, well, you don't go on missions by yourself. You're sent on missions usually. So he's starting to see there's influences out there. Flash, you can say, Flash can be far more just there, and then towards the end of Flash, you can have him meet Bruce, and you can go, so we're in a crime lab, kind of detective work. Think you can give me a hand with this? So you have like right away that tie. You're still seeing them work together. Then Aquaman can find like a beacon in Atlantis that they're like, hey, you know, you found this. We have something just like this from ages ago when it was a problem. And you're like, well, what was it? It's like, it was a great entity from the stars. And you're like, that explains why Atlantis refuses to go to the surface world. Because they just think anything that
hmm
happens on the surface is fucked. They're like, well, we know bad shit comes from the stars, so if we stay underwater, we'll probably be safe. And just like, okay.
yeah.
Then you have Batman. He does his Batman movie. It doesn't have to be about Brainiac, but the whole time he's working on another case. You can see he's like exhausted because he's working on another case, and then he's just. And you can find in the comics, he's actually the one that finds Martian Manhunter, and Martian Manhunter can crash land on Earth essentially. Batman can be the one to intervene and do the detective work to like track him down, find him, understand why he's doing what he's doing because he thinks, oh, this is another beacon sent to us from, or another test sent from the stars that we need to figure out. And then you have Batman and Superman there to confront him. He's like, no, I'm here because my world's wiped out, and I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to make sure this world didn't get wiped out as well. And you're like, oh, this is a real fucking problem now. Then you go into Justice League, where it's
Yeah.
like you've established everybody that they've all had these unifying ties as to why they have to be together. Um, so Aquaman has a threat that's bigger than just you know problems in the ocean. Uh, we can use Flash's talents to our advantage because he's a part of it. So it's all that. Like that's where I would start with a slate. Oh, thank you, my dear. Appreciate it. And that's where I would go from there. And that's where I look at this movie like, where do we need? If that's our goal of where we're going to,
Yeah.
how do we get to that? We need to show Diana as the beacon of hope for the world who believes that we can do good. Superman always wants to save everybody, but he needs to learn to do it the right way. Whereas Batman, he always wants to do the right thing. He's just really willing to bend the rules to do it.
Yeah.
So how do we focus him and get him out of the darkness all the time to the fact that now he can be a true contributor on the world scale to be the best Batman possible?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's a good jumping off point. And then going back to this movie, the whole Africa stuff, cut it 100%.
Absolutely.
The I wrote a couple things down in that scene that just really bothered me. The first one was when Lois Lane she he says something derogatory to her, and then she says, "I'm not a lady, I'm a journalist." And I was like, "Don't tell me you're a strong woman. Show me that you are." Like it's just basic storytelling stuff. Like obviously they're trying to cheat it, so it
Mm-hmm.
takes 2 seconds rather than a scene or something like that. But like you can show Lois being a strong person rather than her just saying, "Oh, I'm a strong woman." Like, I just that stuff bothers me. And then the other thing in there that I think really exemplifies my problem with Zack Snyder is he has Lois like a gun to her head, hostage, and then instead of showing Superman being heroic and taking its time to show that, it just he tackles them in zero point 0.5 seconds and it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the way I saw it in my mind was like he pulls the trigger on the gun to shoot Lois, and then Superman is so fast that he can get there and literally catch the bullet,
Yep.
and then you're taking your time to show, hey, Superman, he's a hero and he's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't just like take the time to show a hero being heroic. I don't understand it. And then he'll slow down other moments that are completely unnecessary.
Yep. Well, that's because Zack Snyder doesn't. Again, Zack Snyder makes Zack Snyder movies for Zack Snyder. Zack Snyder does not make movies to tell great stories. Like the thing is,
Like,
this is Zack Snyder would be a really interesting guy to have on your creative team, but he's not the
sure,
guy that should run stuff because he can challenge you visually. He can challenge ideas. When I hear half his logic on stuff, I don't inherently hate the fact that he questions it. I hate the fact that he burns it to the ground. It's kind of like don't burn bridges. He doesn't burn bridges. He actively blows them up while he's still on the bridge. That's a whole nother
Yeah.
level of doing something. So I reference this a lot. He was a guest on the Joe Rogan Experience, and he talks about his time with Batman, and he's just like, I don't get this whole fan fascination that he doesn't kill. That's ridiculous. And I'm like, no, it's a core tenet of the character. It's kind of important, but let's hear him out. He's like, and the logic here I like. He's like, well, they treat him as this like god, and the first thing I want to do, people are like, well, just don't put him in that situation. He's like, the first thing I want to do is put him in that situation and see what he does. That logic
Hmm.
is not inherently bad. To challenge,
No, that's a good way of showing character.
that's not inherently bad. It's inherently good to challenge the character. But that doesn't mean challenge means, well, fail his core tenets all the time and show that he's flawed. Batman's flawed
Yeah.
in so many ways, he doesn't need to kill people to show it. For instance, I just had this idea.
Yeah.
If we want it, it'd almost be really fun if you could just challenge yourself to see how many um, counterbalance scenes there are. What if Lois is taken hostage with a gunshot? He catches the bullet. He catches it in one hand, takes the guy's arm in one hand, and he's just like, "You're going to jail now," and just gives him a light tap and knocks him out. But very much you can tell he's trying to take care of him. He cares about humanity, so he's not trying to just straight up destroy this guy. But he's got the arm in one hand and the bullet in the other. Drops it,
Yeah.
takes Lois, and just lifts off with the guy
Well, yeah.
hanging by his arm, right? You see him
The,
hold
yeah,
the arm.
the thing I wrote down is when he catches that bullet, that split second where before he like turns to the villain, that's another moment where you can show character. Like him just tackling him through a wall and disappearing. That's that's not satisfying ultimately.
Very much so. And that's why I would find the counterbalance is he has the guy in his arm and he's like, "You're going to jail now." Whereas then you can show Batman, you can cut straight to Batman in a fight and he just breaks the motherfucker's arm. He's just like,
Yeah.
"You're trying to do bad shit?
Yeah.
Fuck
If you
you."
want to show Batman if you want to show Batman being brutal, fine. But don't show him openly killing people.
Well, that's the thing is, I took a count last night. There are at least 15 obvious confirmed kills. There are 5, I'm pretty confident someone died there. And there is 2, they didn't directly show someone in it, but I find it hard to believe that in a row of cars full of criminals and terrorists, there wasn't another guy in that car too. So there's at least 2 other, there could be kills. So in probable kills, Batman kills possibly 22 people in Batman vs. Superman. How many people should Batman ever kill? 0! Fucking 0!
Yeah. Or if you're gonna show him killing someone, really make the audience want to see that person die.
Well, there's a great moment in...
Not just random fucking henchmen.
What arc is it? Oh god, I can't remember the arc. It's about 2008-ish in the comics, in which Darkseid with the anti-life equation starts taking over the planet, and they've done everything they can. They get Darkseid in like kind of a not a weakened state, but he's vulnerable, and Batman's the one to show up and save the day. And he's got this like anti-life Omega bullet or something like that. It's one of the only things that's capable of killing Darkseid. And really it doesn't kill him, it just like it sends them back in time. It's a whole fucking thing. But the cool part about it is if you're going to break the rule, Batman literally says, "This is my one rule, and this is the one time I'm going to break it." And he shoots the bullet at Darkseid. And it matters because you go, he has lost friends, family members, thousands of citizens that he's been millions of people across the planet in all these different crises. Batman's never broken that rule. Ever. And the
Yeah.
one time he's gonna do it when he's like, if I don't do this, world dies. I'm willing to sacrifice my morals here and all of my logic and my rules to make sure nobody dies. That moment matters. And it's important to show that. Whereas if you just say,
Yeah.
oh, Batman, he hates when people get killed. So what does he do? He kills people. You're like, that's so fucking dumb. Like, he's not the Punisher. The Punisher's the other side where he's just like,
Yeah.
how do we solve problems? We just eliminate problems by killing them all.
Hmm. Or if you're gonna show Batman as evil and more like the Punisher, have that be his story arc. That he starts that way, and then by the end, he's a changed man in some way.
Well, I have no issue if there's an 18-month gap between Metropolis and a current story. I think that was smart. But what I would have done is just done even more. Like, you could do a. I never understood why everyone wants to start with Joker in a cinematic universe. What I would do is just have. Joker's a constant. So just have him appear in a bunch of shit with Batman.
Mm.
And this one, what I would do is have him, he can't even get a laugh out of Batman. Batman's so efficient. Batman is so focused on what he is doing that he just beats the shit out of Joker. And even Joker's like, he's more brutal than he's like, oh, you're being more brutal nowadays. You can say it through the Joker, but you're not seeing Batman say, I'm haunted, I'm tortured because of Superman. He shows it where he's just like, I'm not fucking around anymore. Anybody who's a problem, they're being dealt with because I'm dealing with a bigger problem. But he doesn't kill them, but he's just very much it's a great arc from the comics of when he loses Robin, Jason Todd Robin, is Tim Drake comes back, or Tim Drake becomes the new Robin, and Dick Grayson starts coming back into his life as Nightwing, and they both are like, Batman needs a Robin, and it's not because, oh, we want a Robin in the comic books. It's Robin is the light to his dark. It's the balance so he never gets too down the rabbit hole of his own torture of taking it out on criminals. Instead, it's, hey, I'm here to balance you out so you don't just beat the shit out of people constantly. Where Robin's always being like, you cannot do this. Like, if you want to be the protector, you can't be the brutalizer as well. And so that's what I would do is just, have that constantly of, oh my god, like, he ain't fucking around. Where, like, you could, or like Riddler, you can see him, he's like, oh, we've played these intellectual games before, and Batman doesn't even play. He's just like, nope, I'm going for the physical attack immediately. I'm not even going to try to outsmart you, I'm going straight for the attack. Because then you can just say, no, I'm not wasting my time with you. This is, solving the Superman problem and solving the God problem is more important than playing these stupid ass games with you, Riddler.
Mm-hmm.
Immediately. That's how I would focus on that. And then you have Diana bringing him back saying you don't have to do this all the time.
Yeah. Okay, and then the next part in this movie is Superman and Lois in the bath. And the only note I wrote down is Margot Robbie and Henry Cavill will definitely have more chemistry than this.
It could get better. So I will say this, because we're already an hour and a half into the show, if not 2 hours, I think, is just for the sake of efficiency, because it's clear that at this point we both want to rewrite this movie. So it's going to be a future episode no matter what. What are things we would like to keep from this movie? Like, what are things that we would keep? The Metropolis opening is good, and we wanted to keep that.
Well, there's just a lot of like little changes I would make. So like the scene with Batman where everyone's scared, like the cops come in,
Mm-hmm.
the opening Batman.
Yeah, at the trafficking house.
Yeah, all I said was just take 2 seconds to set up the fact that this is a trafficking house. It takes literally, it could take 3 seconds. Just so some sleazebag making a deal to have sex with some trafficking victim,
Mm-hmm.
right? That takes 3 seconds. And then you can show Batman taking them down there because you want to see them punished.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to be brutal with it, guess what? Audiences are probably going to be okay with it
They're gonna
because these
say,
people are
I
assholes.
want him to murder him," and you can see him going right to the line
Yes.
and stopping.
And then another little change I would make is like have um who's Clark's boss? What's his name?
Harry White,
Harry White. Yeah. Have him be more like a Joe J. What is his name? Joe
J. Jonah
Jonah.
Jameson.
Yeah. Um, have him be more like him, where he's like biased. You know, actually give him a character rather than in this where he's just nothing really.
I don't want him to be J. Jonah Jameson because that's a little too much, but make him more cynical. Make him a little
No, no.
bit
What I'm
more,
saying,
you know.
I'm not saying make him that. I'm saying give him a character. In this, he is nothing. He's
What
just a boss.
I really appreciate in the extended cut that he's far more like, give me the reason why you're trying to do this all the time instead of just giving it to you. I appreciate that. And
Okay.
what I would do is I would it to show, like, for instance, in the good ways of showing their heroes. This is really over the top, but it's just a basic thought in my head. What happens if a disaster happens? Clark Kent doesn't go to the story he's supposed to cover of the game. He goes down to the food pantry, he helps out, and he's like, "Well, there's a story here too, Perry." And he's like, "Yeah, food pantries don't sell papers. Sports results do." Where you can see
Yeah.
he's just like, "Hey, you're a real good guy, Smallville, but guess what? You work for a fucking paper, you have a job to do, and I told you to do it." And at the same time, you can see all the food aid, it's coming from Wayne Industries donations.
Yeah.
So you can see Bruce is
Uh,
helping,
yeah.
but he's not going to show up and serve the food at the food pantry where, like, Clark will actually come and, like, stock the boxes and, like, feed the poor. And then you can have Perry White just be like, "I fucking told you. This is
Yeah.
nice. Do this on your off time. You have a story, you have a job." And you can see Clark's putting off his real world responsibilities to help people all the time.
Yeah. And then also wrote down, instead of having Lois track this really stupid, boring plot, the whole Africa plot, scrub that. Just make Lois investigating Batman and his quote unquote justice. Like, for one, that gets Lois more involved in the story
Mm-hmm.
because it's not going to be superfluous anymore. It's actually central to the whole idea of Batman versus Superman. That also gives Clark a reason to view Batman more negatively because Lois will be biased against him. And then, um, yeah, there's just a bunch of like little changes that I would make that could make more sense and make the story streamlined. Because right now it's just kind of a jumbled mess of stuff.
Yeah, I almost even love taking the line of Superman saves Lois from a problem that Batman was intervening in. And Batman could have handled it, but Superman's like, "You were going to fail." He's like, "I had it completely under control." And
Yeah,
even use the famous line, "Do you bleed? You will." You can use a variation of that. He's like, "Why?" Like, you can see Superman losing his mind and starts lecturing him almost like, "I'm better than you," and putting the God thing in it. And Batman can literally just say, like, "Some of us still bleed." And you could show Superman's, like, never bled before, outside of that almost. And then
yeah,
at the end, he could bleed because of Lex Luthor, which would be an interesting touch. But you could do, like, some of us still fucking bleed. Some of us still have problems to work out.
yeah,
We all can't just scoop everybody up like a kitten out of the tree. So you're punching up with Batman, up at a god. So you're rooting for him too, but you're also saying, like, yeah, Superman's got a point. He's not always that clean and responsive.
Yeah.
And it's just
Yeah, and
it's
then
a
I wrote,
good little counterbalance again to, I think, Lois investigating him. I love the idea of her starting super biased and then her coming to the conclusion that Gotham, like, you can go to like the Narrows or the other sections of Gotham that are just always shit, and she goes there and she starts talking to people and she starts seeing, well, wait, life's not as bad here as I thought. And there, and you can see people. She's like, oh, do you have any police intervention? She's like, you can have her investigating and talking to people through
well,
journalism, and they're just like, there's only one person that actually comes here and helps us, and
yeah,
everyone's like, what do you mean? It's like, he's the only motherfucker that ever shows up and helps us in a problem.
yeah. And also, you could actually have it where it looks like Batman is doing all these brutal things, but then really it's secretly Lex framing Batman for this.
Mm-hmm.
That's another aspect you could do, and then ultimately Lois finds that out,
Yeah,
that Lex is actually the mastermind behind all these things, because that it doesn't make it so wide, you know?
yeah.
Like stories can be small. It's fine.
You have
These
Superman and
characters are
Wonder
big.
Woman. You have Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. It's gonna feel big no matter what.
Exactly, that's the point. Yeah. And then yeah, I wrote down, isn't Lex Luthor supposed to be reasonable and rational, not creepy and like, I mean, pretty much in this, he's just psychotic.
Yeah, no, he's a zany version of the Riddler. That's what he is. That's
Yeah.
not. He's not Lex Luthor. I mean, in your theatrical cut, did you see the blundering speech at his gala for the library where Bruce, Clark, and Diana all meet for the first time? Like Bruce has to sneak in and put the decryption device in Lex's computer, and he's
It's like
like, he's repeating himself. He's like, no, I
30
don't want to say
seconds.
that. I don't want to say that. No, and it's like
Yeah.
Lex Luthor would immediately say something incredibly intelligent and also demeaning to other people, while you could say like,
Yeah.
no, no, he's such a good guy, look at him, and it's like, that's kind of demeaning. Like,
Yeah, that's the central point that I wrote down with Lex is just I don't respect him. Therefore I'm not going to respect him as a villain.
right.
That's it's as simple as that. And then I just wrote, why not have Batman know that Clark is Superman?
Mm-hmm.
Like it would show he's a good detective. It would show he has resources and stuff to figure all this stuff out.
Ooh.
Like there's no point in not having him know.
Never.
Really.
Uh, Building on the idea that I like, what if you show that as part of your opening credits, like that montage we were talking about? You have your haunting of Martha, and then his whole like arc, and then you can see at the end of the credit part, he's just furiously researching Superman with like footage and all that stuff, and he's like, I found him. It's Clark Kent, and that's when you can go to Clark having a reflective moment, being haunted by what happened in Metropolis, but then get into
Yeah.
he helped Metropolis after Zod was killed. Like, it's just a
Yeah.
great transition point.
The thing I wrote down is the problem isn't that Bruce doesn't know who Superman is. The problem is that Batman knows who Superman is, but he still views him as a threat. He
Yep.
views him as like the other, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
then that's the whole because ultimately, what is your goal? You want Batman and Superman to see their differences, but then come together ultimately in the end.
Yeah. They have to.
And for that to happen, you need Batman to change his view from, oh, Superman is a threat, he's the other, to, oh, Superman is just like us and he wants to save as many people as possible.
Right.
It's like literally it boils down to that simple idea in the end.
It's basic. It's easy.
Um, and then I wrote down, make the Superman montage of him saving people way less emo.
Yep.
It is, yeah,
See,
we
there
talked about it a little
again,
bit. Where
again, there's
somber.
there's highlights of that I really like. I actually love the shot of Dia de los Muertos, and
Hmm.
they're all reaching out to touch God because he saved them.
Yeah,
That's a phenomenal scene, and you can show his discomfort in that, and him just going. You could almost show the
but
montage. It starts very much of him going here to help, and then it slowly builds into the point where he's being worshipped as this deity, and he's just like, I'm not a god. I'm just a man trying to help. And then
yeah,
he kind of has to like jolt
but
off really fast.
it doesn't it doesn't work when Superman's overall theme is supposed to be hope when it looks like he wants to kill himself.
Mm-hmm.
Like he looks miserable.
Right. And that's where you have to balance that. God, every time you talk, I'm getting a better idea. Because there are pieces to keep.
And then yeah, I wrote down the it's the nightmare, right? That's the
Yeah.
Batman stuff.
Get rid of all that
Cut
shit.
all that shit out.
Cut it all.
100% cut it.
It's
Yeah.
dumb. It makes
I
no
was
sense.
like, if you're gonna keep any of it, fine. Do it in the end credit scene. Do not put it in the movie proper.
Right.
Um, and then that whole thing with the Flash.
Yep.
Okay, so you're either showing Bruce is capable of seeing the future,
Yes.
or which obviously Bruce is he doesn't have superpowers.
Nope.
He's a guy. Or it's like a true nightmare, which would mean that it's not real.
Correct.
But ultimately, because we know from future movies, it is real, or it's going to be.
Yep. It's real stupid, right? You cut all that shit.
Again, it's so nonsensical. Let's see what else I write down. Oh, another thing. The whole part where Lex is like up at the top of that skyscraper,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of like revealed
Yeah.
that he's pulling all the strings. That's ultimately not satisfying when we already know he's pulling all the strings.
Yep.
Like, if you're gonna make a mystery, make it a mystery for the audience, not for the characters in the story.
Correct.
It's again, it just makes no sense to me what the ideas are behind these.
You have again. You have someone who can't tell a coherent story. Flat out. And the thing is, this is it's very difficult sometimes when you understand the entire like the armies assembled to create movies like this. It's not all Zack Snyder's fault. However,
No, of course not.
it's really hard when you're the unifying tie behind a lot of movies that have all the same similar problems to not say
Yeah,
you're a huge part of the problem.
yeah, and I mean, it really it's the writers, the director, and the overall supervisors, like producers of it.
Yep.
That's who's really at fault. Yeah, it's just so easy to make logical choices that, like, it's so obvious some of the problems in it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and that's what's baffling about the whole movie. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Um,
It's brutal.
I like I like I like the take on Alfred. Do you?
Yeah. And I think Jeremy Irons was a
Okay.
phenomenal
Yeah,
choice.
I would keep. Yeah, I would keep all that stuff. I like that he questions Bruce's decisions.
Yeah.
I like that. Um,
He's supposed to. He's supposed to be a counterbalance. That's the point.
yeah.
That's his father figure that has to say, like, I'm here to support you, but this is stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that take on him. And I think, yeah, Jeremiah Irons is great. That's a great choice. Um, and then the car chase, all I wrote down was, I like this car chase, but don't clearly kill people.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy. You don't need it.
Right. No, I think this is what I'm talking about, man. Like, there are so many cool elements of
Mm-hmm.
of the movie. I remember the first time I did the review for this when I was just coming like I saw the movie twice before it came out to the general public. One was with you.
Mm-hmm.
I I can't remember if I went with Ab once or I just went by myself once because it was Monday and a Tuesday before it came out on Friday. And I can't remember if you were at the first one with me or the second one with me. And
I think it was a second.
I remember just gushing because I was like, this is so cool because you're just seeing glitz glamour first time run, right? You're not going,
Yeah.
wait. And I remember going like, oh, that moment's so cool. That's that. That's that. And you're like, you do know he kills a lot of people, and me having to be like, yeah, I see it a little bit more now, where
Yeah.
it's problematic. Ugh.
Yeah. What I wrote down is if Batman has no restraint, he's not a hero.
Yeah, he's a vigilante that is a problem.
Yeah. And then I also wrote down it should really be Batman confronting Superman, not the opposite. It's Batman who has a problem with Superman, not Superman that has a problem with Batman. Ultimately,
Yeah,
they try to kind of set it up where it's like, oh, his Batman's justice isn't justice, but it's not strong enough to where you would think Superman would be like, oh, okay, I should, I should end the Batman.
right. And this is the whole problem with. I think we got a lot of good pieces here. It's and we're gonna have
Yeah,
a lot of
actually,
fun with it.
I actually stopped taking notes after the Granny Peach Tea scene. Because ultimately, like, yeah, all the things I wrote that completely changed the story to where almost all that stuff at the end wouldn't happen
Mm-hmm.
in my version of it.
As much as I think the government stuff actually works, I wouldn't have any of it. Wouldn't have a single thing.
Or if you're gonna do it, trim it down to like at least half of what's in there.
Yeah, I think that's a solid thought. Batman has to be the one to confront. Batman has
Yeah,
to be the one to. We have a good starting point here of what we want to do.
yeah, and then I just wrote like you need more scenes like the one with Martha's pep talk,
Mm-hmm.
kind of, you know.
Yeah,
You need more scenes like that where it's showing Superman as a human.
very much so. You
Um,
need to have those pieces.
yeah, I like the where he's framing Superman for the bombing in Congress or wherever it is.
Yeah,
I like that. That's fine. Um, and then I also wrote the whole like you let your family die thing, like all the pictures and
yeah,
notes and all that. If you're gonna do that, just have it completely unrelated. Have it be like um about like Robin's death or something.
yeah. In the
That's
context of
world building.
that's world building, and it's far more. That's gonna hit a nerve a lot more than rando guy. I think the point is you're supposed to
Yeah,
think like, oh, Batman cares so much about humanity, and it's like yes, but the audience doesn't feel that. The audience will feel it if it's a Robin. The audience will
yeah.
feel it if they know Batman's backstory and go, ooh, that
It's
one's gonna
world
hurt.
building. Yeah, it's world building. It's hinting at more about the character, and it's hinting at that this character has a past.
Right.
Like, and then my last note is just about the overall action
Mm-hmm.
of this. I hate like Zack Snyder's so obsessed with showing like, oh, if these people were real in the real world, this is what it would look like. Like it's like he's throwing Superman like miles across the sky and stuff. Like that's not ultimately satisfying, and that's also what adds to all this collateral damage
Yep.
that people complain about.
And it
It's like,
doesn't. It desensitizes you as an audience member. It's something that happens in pro wrestling all the time. Someone goes through a table once, you're like, holy shit. Someone goes through a table twice, you're like, okay. Someone goes through a
yeah,
table 3 times, you're like, well, who cares? It happens every day. Like,
like
what matters?
think of that fight scene between Iron Man and Thanos
Yeah.
in Infinity War. Like that whole fight takes place over like what 100 yards, maybe.
Yep.
It's like to show they're powerful, you don't need to show them being wholly destructive.
Yep.
It can be smaller. It's fine. We'll understand the characters are strong.
It's the
I
three.
don't need.
It's literally the holy trinity of comic book characters. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm fine with Wonder Woman joining a fight at the end. That's fine. Um, yeah, that's really my main takeaway from it. Is
Oh
like
yeah. No.
there's just overall changes that you can make that would make it 10 times better.
Oh yeah. No, we already got two rewriting projects now because Phantom Menace just made me really want to rewrite that whole movie. So got Phantom Menace for the future, and now we got Batman vs Superman to rewrite. Not full scenes, scene synopsis. You know, just it's gonna be fun.
Yeah,
It's gonna be fun. But I think you have major cast problems. You have major creative force problems, um, and it's important to do. So, oh
yeah.
god, oh god. But this has been a good show. I've appreciated this quite a bit.
I didn't appreciate that I had to read the movie, but it's a fun exercise.
It's a very fun exercise. Sometimes you have to get through the shit to get to the fun exercise. That's the whole point. So,
Yeah.
So I get you though. Oh, but this has been fun. But that's gonna do it here for today's episode. Now that we have homework, and it's gonna be even more fun. If you liked this episode, let us know. Give us a like, comment, subscribe. If you didn't like us, or you have some ideas of what Batman vs Superman could be instead of what we got, let us know here. You can check it out all the time here on YouTube, Spotify, our socials on Instagram and TikTok. If you want to support us even more, head over to Etsy. Go to ptecreative.etsy.com and get some cool merchandise for yourself. But it's been a fun time, friends. It's been quite a fun time. You excited for your homework?
No.
I am, but it's something I've always wanted to do. I hope y'all are excited for the homework. Check us out in the next episode of the ONETA Movie Show. It's going to be a fun one as we are going and continuing our big box office series, watching another great Batman movie, Dark Knight. It's going to be a whole lot of fun.
A much better one.
It's a much better movie than Batman vs. Superman. Let's have some fun. Go watch a great movie and enjoy your day, friends. Peace out. Peace, love, and hugs. Bye!